You're here because you want to know how much college is going to cost for your children. I mean, let's dive in. I'm Elizabeth. I'm a certified financial planner and I work with clients for my day job and love to share what I'm learning with the public for free. So, I have a wonderful college calculator cost tool that I like to use. I'm sure there's plenty others online, so we don't have to be religious about it. Use what works for you. Today's example is going to deal with a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, so a two-child household. I think you can still follow along if you have one or more children, or if you have no children and are planning to have children. Over time, and we can certainly ask Google this or ChatGPT, the cost of college has been going up about 6.3% relative to inflation, which is an average annual inflation rate. So some years are higher, some years much lower, of 2.5% for just your basic costs of living costs. So quite a spread. And if money can grow currently in 2024 at 4 or 5% in a savings account, if you are not investing some funds for your children's education, you'd actually be losing money if it's sitting in savings because it needs to grow at 6.3 on average every year, and it's only gaining 4% at today's savings rates. Now, there are certainly times where I bonds, which were a reconfigured form of educational bonds, where they were earning more interest than 6.3, and that was a great place to keep it in. There's also talk of 529 plans. Today, I'm not going to talk about is college going to be there by the time our minor age children are 18, and I will deliberate a little bit on the pros and cons of exclusively it's the 529 plan that's college education funding. There's also Coverdell educational savings accounts. There's lots of limits, but bear these in mind. I'm not going to dive too deep into that. I'm diving deep because you want to know how much it's going to cost. So that's what we're going to target in. So let's take an example here. I'm going to share my screen. All right. So let's add the first college goal. Traditionally, it's nice to add the, youngest. So we'll just put in, you can put in any birth year into this, which is great. And I happen to know from the client how much is in the 529 plan. It's also important to know, let's talk about this 529 versus taxable. So 529 plans have come a long way in terms of additional flexibilities. The Tax and Jobs Act of 2018 allowed up to $10,000 per year to be used for qualified education expenses at the K through 12 level. So that's kinder through 12th grade before college. So bear that in mind. Additionally, now there's a new legislation, the Secure Act, that passed most recently. I think two, one of those. Google it. But it came with the 529 expressly able, if open for 15 years for the same beneficiary, to use the balance left over and contribute to a Roth IRA. So whatever the limit is to contribute to a Roth IRA, that beneficiary can then use excess 529 funds to make the $7,000 contribution. This year it's 7,000, for instance. I'm not sure if that beneficiary needs to have the wages earned to justify that contribution. There is a $35,000 lifetime max on those 529 contributions into the Roth IRA. It's not a rollover, it's an allowable contribution from one account to the other. So definitely some planning things to think about. I think if nothing else from today's conversation, yikes, it's going to be expensive, but also that's okay. And it's not terrible to invest a little bit in a 529 and a little bit in another strategy, right? So most people pay for colleges within 4 different ways. They either get gifting from parents or grandparents. They can also have savings, their parents' cash flow, and student contributions or working through college, scholarships and grants. The last one is loans. And both parents and students can take out loans. I'm not going to deliberate too much on student loans as I'm not an expert, but I have a very good resource for that. So like and subscribe and leave me a message in the comment if you want to hear more about student loan resources. But certainly, let's dive back in here. I know this about the client. Great. Perfect. So it's good to confirm this, that this is the actual age that they will start college. I don't know. I don't know what their intention is. They're very high powered. It's good to think about how you paid for as a parent, how you paid for your own college, right? So keep that in mind as you're thinking through for both parents or any parents or caregivers involved. How did you fund college? What were the pluses and minuses of that experience? And how would you apply that to your own child, right? And have a plan sooner rather than later and age appropriately be peppering in conversation, right? I think that's the best way to get ahead of like very expensive non-monetizable degrees, which is a concern, right? No matter how you look at it, I do think more education is good as a rule, but there are several exceptions. So I'm going to take the average of all for now just to get, some numbers. It's interesting that you can find a specific college. I'm actually going to look for mine just because I'm curious. And interesting. Maybe the last time I checked, it wasn't in here. Oh, state. Okay. So they're listing in-state tuition here, but not many people live in state, um, District of Columbia. But wow, it's quite a significant amount each year. I did not pay that much. In fact, no. So, okay, great. That was again, just interesting. So we're just going to average all, right? Public in-state, public out-of-state. I've honestly, out of all the hand-raising clients who look for financial planning, and they are of a variety of net worths and incomes, we don't have minimums, so we're an exception to the rule. We have people of all means, but I've never heard someone wanting to look at a 2-year option. It's either usually 2-year or 4-year public in-state compared to private. In this case, I'm going to average all and wait for client feedback. This is saying inflate at 6%. I wonder if it's no. Okay. I want to reflect it a little bit more appropriately with what we have in the plan. Okay. Grants and scholarships. It's interesting they put this at this end of the data entry point. I think this is something to put in at the end. We can add these in later. So just like we talked about, grants and scholarships and any amount financed. It's going to reduce how much per year. And each year it goes up as well, right? It might be 36,000. This is today's dollars. So in 2024, this is how much it costs per year for tuition. We're not talking about books and all the others. So 36,000 times 1.063 equals 2025's tuition rates. So if you followed along on that, it just means each of the 4 years it's going to go up. And is your child on a 5-year track? That's just a question I'm positing. Don't need to have answers, right? I don't want this to be a scare tactic so much as let's look at the big picture and let's work our way backwards and come up with some options and let's frame the discussion right earlier in our kids, educational careers. Because there are tons and tons of options out there, right? We're not just limited to a 4-year college, nor are we limited to a particular place. The more limits I think you put on it, the less flexibility you have, which is fine if you have the means. Risk, I'm going to say moderate. See, look, average annual return. I don't know. But let's take a look. I'll let the client disagree with me on that. Excellent. I I love this. This demonstrates what the shortfall might be and how much the existing account will contribute to. This is terrific. I absolutely, absolutely love this. I think it demonstrates a lot, right? And then it also says if you continue to contribute this amount per year. If it was a lump sum, it basically would need to be doubled. So that would top it up in today's dollars. Great. I'm going to call this done for now. And I'm going to add another goal. And we're going to use the same metric. So an average of all the expenses, and we're going to inflate at the same rate. And otherwise, in general, keeping all the variables the same for now. Moderate. As you can see, the average annual return of a moderate portfolio, because it needs to be more conservative over time compared to 30 years until you retire, we're talking 10 to 20 years tops until you attend college. The average inflation rate of college costs is higher than a moderate average annual return of a risk appropriate portfolio. Now, I'll say this, 529 accounts in this day and age make it pretty straightforward. You literally do make this choice. You say, this is my beneficiary, this is their name, this is their social, this is their birthday. They're either, conservative, moderate, or aggressive, and they take a basket of funds and do the work for you. I do encourage it. Some 529 plans allow, some states allow 529 plan contributions to be tax deductible only against your state income tax. California is not one of those, and there's a handful of others of states who do not recognize any tax deduction. There's never any federal tax deduction. And stepping back, 529 accounts are investment accounts that have some limitations on how much you can put in, but they're designed to be invested. And then when you sell those investments to cash, there's no capital gains tax, provided you're using it for qualified educational expenses. If you don't, there is a income tax assessed and a penalty assessed. So you're somewhat locked in. But there's several other options, particularly if you're a parent starting later in life, having children later in life, myself would be in that basket, where you may be having an 18-year-old in your household attending college or some of those years, while one of the spouses is age 59 and a half, which means you can pull from your own retirement accounts. I don't recommend that as a strategy without very careful consideration of the household, because if you're someone who has a hard time spending or has a hard time with spending, so spending too much, I don't know, that's a risky move, but with some households, I think it's a decent strategy. But if you're a younger parent, certainly, take your wins where you can. The 529 is a great spot. Okay, so I'm keeping all the variables the same. I'm going to ask for client input. I'm also going to design this to be the lump sum amount. And I'm doing this because I can demonstrate the options in several different ways, but I want to be able to demonstrate to the client, how much in contributions they could make to fully fund what they need to fund. And you'll see if you're making the contribution into savings or investments, it's going to be a little bit more than if it's in the 529 plan. And theoretically, that's to cover gains tax and things like that. So if we invest, even in a savings account, we owe taxes on the interest earned. If we invest and we double, the stock we buy doubles, right? Goes from $10 to 20. That means we owe taxes on the $10 gain. So bear that in mind. There are reasons why people like to use retirement accounts in 529 accounts. It's not all, fancy footwork here. This is pretty helpful accounts, given these stretch goals as well. I'm going to take a look at the detail. Okay. And let's take a look at the report. Just needs to load. And great. So I'm going to be able to send this to the client and let them know the additional lump sum amount that would be required to get them to what they need for college funding, and that there are options. It doesn't have to just be in the 529 plan. And they may or may not want to see more helpful information about whether they contribute annually. I want to tell them lump sum because they may or may not be in a situation where the means to do so. Just fund it all in one fell swoop. So to that end, we'd have to check to make sure each 529 plan allows that much more into the plan. Some cap out at around 200 grand. I don't think we'll be in jeopardy of that in this case. We also want to seriously consider if the 529 plan should be the exclusive home of these funds. And taking a step back, contributions, the money you put in for your beneficiaries or kids into your 529 plans, they are subject to gift tax exempt limits, which I believe are 18,000 per spouse combined. That's 36,000 in 2024. I could be wrong. Google those amounts. Gift tax exempt annual amount 2024, and you'll find it. And or consult somebody who's a professional specifically in taxes, like a CPA or tax preparer. But that's going to give you the amount. So maybe they can't do the lump sum this year, right? But they could do 36,000 this year. There's an interesting 5-year rule with 529 plans where you can contribute an amount that can be 5 years worth of the gift tax exempt. Tricky stuff if you're a grandparent because of estate laws. Tricky stuff if you're a parent. Keeping track of all this is cumbersome. But are you limited to that? Are you not? It's a little bit of a toss-up, essentially. So this is going to be conversational fodder for the client. I'm going to make sure that she confirms these years and amounts in this chart. And I'm going to expressly state the college costs that I used and the inflation rate. If she would like me to make changes, then she may tell me so. And did we say, okay. And the required savings here, I like that, has been broken out. Because annually you can save this much into either account. So it's not that you need to save both, I believe. I think it's either or. Yeah. Should be either or. Great. And annually that looks like that amount. Monthly that looks like that amount. Lump sum is that amount. It can be split between different accounts. And if it is in a taxable account, just plan for a little bit more. I don't love giving sticker shock about the cost of college. It's not my favorite part of my job. When I look at folks who want to retire early or retire in general and are starting late, it always bums me out to see the drain on resources college costs has on a household's ability to retire. So it's a complicated issue. It's worth discussing. And that's why, if this household continues to work the years that their children are attending college and there's an excess amount of money and funds, that can be repurposed into real-time tuition costs at that time. So we don't have to actually fundamentally give them the exact amount, right? And we also want to be flexible. We don't want to commit 100% of funds maybe into a 529 plan if it's not necessarily flexible enough. There may be some years it's a little disappointing to see a 529 account, particularly when it needs to be more conservative and the returns are just paltry or lower than we need. That can be frustrating, but any amount helps. What I also like about 529 plans is most of them allow for gifting, pretty straightforward. So you can have relatives who want to give money to your child as a gift, even if I think it usually has to be greater than $25 denominations, but I don't know. They write a check and there are usually instructions, albeit they can get complicated, but you can make a check out to your child's 529 plan. I've seen electronic options as well, but each state has its own 529 plan and there's just several to choose from. I like the Vanguard Nevada plan. I don't have to be state agnostic being in California because I don't get a state tax benefit. But research if your state 529 contribution state tax deduction, look it up. It might be the reason why you would ongoing fund rather than lump sum, because I think I looked up Arizona. If you contribute $8,000 a year into 529 plans, you get $8,000 reducing your taxable state income. And I think Arizona has maybe 4 to 6% state income tax. So that could be pretty helpful. There can be limits to the state income tax deduction too. If your income is extremely high, you may phase out of it. So definitely take a look and research what you have available to you. Some is better than none. Having a plan is better than not. The 529 plan, once you have a social security number, is a great idea. Even if you are pregnant, you can be your own beneficiary and then swap to change the beneficiary to your child once you have a social security number assigned. It's, like I said, great for gifting. It's a great gifting account. In lieu of, these days we have a lot of cheap junk that kids get as gifts. This could be a helpful alternative for the right intentioned gift giver. So that's my talk on what we can anticipate from college costs, right? So let's review. Disclosure, disclosure, disclosure. We have 2 children, approximately ages 7 and 4. So they'll be attending college in a way that may or may not overlap. We'll have to take a look at the chart for that. They have a current asset value invested in a 529 plan each. They each have their own plan. And we want to know what additional amount is going to be required to be saved in order to fund college. Now, our assumption is that college is going to cost, in today's dollars, $36,410 per year. So that inflates, and we can look at the chart and see how it goes. It inflates at 6.3%. So we want the client to confirm what they want for college cost and the inflation rate. So in this case, an additional lump sum contribution needs to be about $80,000 or $90,000, depending on the account strategy type. And that could be accomplished in 1 to 3 years and not lose any of the gift tax exempt amounts. However, there's that 5-year rule. I'm putting a big asterisk there, though, because there's some estate issues that need to be disclosed before I make a specific recommendation like that. All right, so son has cost 2034 to 2037. And then daughter, so 2037 is going to be an overlap year. So that is 80,000 here, 80,000 there. That's going to be a big year. Great. So we have these amounts. What's also notable about the 529 plans, at least before this Roth IRA Interesting Secure Act update as of 2024, is that you can change the beneficiary. So before the Roth IRA thing, where you had to have the account open for 15 years, presumably for the same single beneficiary, you could have one 529 account and change beneficiaries in the year. So you can have the son as the beneficiary, January and February, make your contribution, gift tax exempt limit. And then March, you switch the beneficiary to daughter, and then April and May, you use the gift tax exempt limit. This year's 36,000 you put into her plan, right? Yeah, I mean, you'd be essentially, there is a gift tax if you gave more than that amount. And usually that means that just comes off your estate at the end. But avoid that complication. Just know these limits. Most people are not putting that much into these plans. And if you are, you probably have a really good financial advisor already, or should, who's walking you through this. There's also a slight caveat if you're self-employed or you qualify at all for a Roth, 401k, 403b, Roth TSP, et cetera, et cetera. Those can be interesting accounts if you're 59 and a half at any point in your child's college education. If you already have enough saved for retirement, the Roth versions of the employer-sponsored retirement plans, like Roth 401k, Roth 403b, Roth 457, Roth TSP, Roth TSA, you're strategically putting yourself in a position where you can penalty-free, after age 59 and a half, take distributions from those accounts. All things being equal, the 529 and the Roth 401k, except all those account types, they are the same. They are after-tax dollars go in. They grow tax-free. And if they're used for educational expenses, they are also completely tax and penalty-free. However, the Roth 401k or any of those other plans do mean that you can spend it on literally anything. You don't have to spend it, and it is yours. The 529 is the beneficiaries, and it is limited to qualified educational expenses, which is an important term. That is the Googleable term, qualified educational expenses. Anyhow, I'm going to send this back for client feedback. I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully this wasn't sticker shock about college, but more a note of, if this seems out of means, hopefully there's time. And if there aren't a lot of opportunities for a lot of time, having the real conversation sooner rather than later about college costs, right? Researching it, using your public or private school career, or excuse me, college, what are they called? College counseling programs, and getting all the information you can. Consider the community college programs in your area and or any community college. I know a lot of people, or I've come across a lot of people who wanted to go to UC Santa Barbara and ended up attending, I think it's Cuesta. There's a community college near UC Santa Barbara where even if you're moving from Bay Area, where I'm San Francisco Bay Area, or anywhere to Santa Barbara to attend Cuesta, the community college, for 2 years, get the credits you need, you're better primely positioned if you've done well there to then transfer into UC Santa Barbara. So community college rates, and maybe as a parent, you would subsidize then room and board potentially, right? Potentially. I'm just trying to limit the max range that we'd be talking about for costs. Having said that, I've also seen California clients send two children to attend NYU, no scholarships and allowances, room and board, apartments. They two children did overlap for a time in the city, and they did not live together, right? Single occupancy rentals for each of them. So it can be done a variety of different ways when you have the means. So hopefully you found this helpful. There's so much more to talk about in this area. Thanks.